Next, I'm going to demonstrate for you number 6b. The instructions simply say factor the following. Okay, remember, first step, every factor problem is to look for a GCF, something in common to all of your terms. Well, I have an x cubed, a 5x squared, a 9x, and a 45. I don't have an x in every term, and there's no number in front of the first term. That means I don't have a GCF. So the second thing that I do once I've determined whether or not I have a GCF and factored it out if I do, is to count my number of terms. I have 1, 2, 3, 4 terms. If there's no GCF, the only method we have for factoring 4 terms is grouping. So I'm going to factor this by grouping, and I'm going to group so that I have those 2 terms together, the first 2 that are given to me, and those 2 terms together. Now you don't have to circle them like that, but those are what I'm going to look at to begin with. So I look at x cubed and 5x squared. My GCF of those is x squared. So I'm going to factor that out, and then I say x cubed divided by x squared gives me x. Bring down my 5. 5x squared divided by x squared leaves me 5. That's what I factored out of the first 2. Now I know the rule is on grouping that I'm going to have 2 sets of parentheses, and they both need to have the same thing in them. That means I need an x plus 5 left after I factor my GCF out of here. Well, I recognize that I have a subtraction sign there. I'm going to need an addition sign, and that tells me that I'm going to need to factor out a negative. Once I've decided what sign I'm going to factor out, I look at my numbers and I look for a GCF. And of course, that would be 9. That's what's in common to both 9x and 45. So that's what I'm going to factor out. Now I have negative 9x divided by negative 9. That leaves me positive x. Negative 45 divided by negative 9 gives me positive 5. And now I've gone from a 4-term polynomial to a 2-term polynomial. I look at those 2 terms and I say, what do they have in common? And of course, that's the x plus 5. So I factor that common term out, and what's left for me is the x squared minus 9, and that gives me my second set of parentheses. Now, remember, when you're factoring, once you think you're done, you always have to look back at your factors and say, is there anything I can still do to them? There's nothing I can do to x plus 5, but x squared minus 9 is still a difference of 2 perfect squares. So there is something I can do to factor that. That factors to the sum, whoops, that's a 3, the sum and difference of their roots. So it was the root of the first term, the root of the last term, a plus and a minus sign. And now, when you have to factor something further, don't forget that you want to carry down that first factor. You can't just leave it up at the previous step. So this 4-term polynomial factored to 3 binomials. Okay, why don't we go ahead and try C while we're at it. C is 3x to the 4th minus 375x. Okay, now again, just like on every problem, let me go ahead and separate these. Just like on every factoring problem, the first thing we look for is a GCF, something in common. Well, 3 divides into 375, so 3 is in common. And I have an x to the 4th and an x, so x is in common. I'm going to factor those out. 3x 4th divided by 3x gives me x cubed minus 375 divided by 3 is 125, and that x cancel each other out. So now I factored out my GCF. I look in my parentheses to determine whether or not there is still something I can factor. I have 2 terms. With 2 terms, I'm looking for a difference of squares. It's not that, because this is a cubic, and 125 is not a perfect square either. Or a sum or difference of cubes. Not a sum because there's a subtraction sign. It's a difference of cubes. X cubed is a perfect cube, of course, and 125 is also, it has a cubic root of 5. So again, I bring down my 3x. You never want to forget to bring down what you've already factored out. And now, the rule for factoring a difference of cubes is take the cubic root of the first term, the same sign, the cubic root of the last term, and now, remember, I don't even need to look at that anymore. I'm working from here. I squared the first term. I use the opposite sign. Remember SOP, same opposite positive. I multiply the first number times the last number, or letter in this case. That's 5x. I use a positive sign, and I square the last term. Once again, difference of cubes. Take the cubic root of the first term, the same sign, the cubic root of the last term. Don't look at that anymore. Look down here. Square the first term, use the opposite sign, multiply the first times the last, use a positive sign, square the last term. Same, opposite, positive. And that's it.